Hi paper crafters, this is Robin, and today is day 3 at the stamp release party at my craft spot. Today's stamp set that I'll be using is called With Deepest Sympathy, and this stamp set has some beautiful sentiments that we need for those special occasions. For today's card, the pattern paper that I'm using is from My Mind's Eye, and this is a 6x6 pad, and the name of it is called Lost and Found 2. I love the vintage feel of this paper pad. My first layer I'm cutting at 4 inches by 5 3/8, and then the second layer, which will be underneath, is cut at 4 1/8 by 5 1/4. And those two papers will just be layered right on top of each other. For a few of my embellishments, I wanted to make ribbon rosettes, and so I went ahead and just took some of the crinkled ribbon from my craft spot, and I'm just taking a needle and thread, and I tie a little bit of a knot at the end, and then I'm just going to weave it back and forth through the ribbon. Just a very simple stitch, nothing fancy about this, just weave it back and forth. And then once I've done that, then I pull it really tight, and I just try to keep the ribbon so it's laid flat. And once I do that, then I go ahead and just tie a knot, and just keeping that thread tight, and tie a knot. Then I just fuss with it a little bit to get it laying the way I like it, and I've already done the brown and the cream colored crinkle ribbon and made rosettes with them. I used my dynamic metal die for this flourish image. This is called Fancy Flourish from My Favorite Things. I'm going to stamp my sentiment onto a piece of pattern paper from the same paper pad. And you can read what it says there. And then I just go ahead and trim it with my paper trimmer, just to get it to the size that I would like. And then I back it with a piece of brown cardstock, just putting a little bit of tape on it, and then I'll go ahead and just trim it with my paper trimmer again. Now I'm just deciding the placement of where I want to put the images on my card, and here you can see the metal dynamic from My Favorite Things. I decided to grab my Martha Stewart leaf punch and punch a few leaves out, and I'll put them around my card, around the ribbon rosettes. This is a pack of doilies that I purchased from Walmart, just very inexpensive doilies that you can get in the usually the wedding section. So I go ahead and just take my distress ink, and well, first I want to punch out the extra little holes. Sometimes they get a little bit of paper stuck in some of those holes, so I go ahead and just poke those out with my paper piercer. And the ink that I'm using is the Vintage Photo. It's probably my most loved ink pad from the Tim Holtz section. Just laying out the placement of where I want to put all my images. And then I'll tell you, there's lots of layers to those doilies. I had already pulled one off previously, you might have seen. So I'm going to just use my 2A glue pen to ink up around the edges of my doily and lay it on my card. And then I'll just trim off that extra that I had hanging over the edge. I decided to add a little bit of stitching using my sewing machine all the way around the edge. So then once I do the sewing, I just pull the threads to the back of my paper and then just tape them down. And then I wanted to add a little bit of ink over that stitching, just to make it a little bit more vintage looking. Then for my flourish image, I'm just going to use my 2A glue pen again. Get all those little teeny flourishes, and then add it to my card, and then I just use a baby wipe to wipe my mat off. Now I'm ready to mount these two pieces onto another white piece of cardstock. And before I do that, I want to go ahead and add a couple of brads to my sentiment. And then I'm going to use my mounting tape to go ahead and mount that on top of my card, just so it has a little bit of lift. And then I'll mount this onto a brown piece of cardstock, and this is a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 size card. And then I'll just I'm using hot glue to attach my ribbon rosettes to my card. And then I'll just put a little bit of hot glue on my little leaves and just tuck them right into place. And then I have a couple of half-back pearls that I'm going to stick in the center of my flowers. And here I'm trying to decide what to put in the centers, and I decide to go with just the half-back pearls. And I'll just use just a little bit of hot glue, and then I'll use my tweezers to help me hold them into place while I put them on. I'll go ahead and add a little bit more inking around the edges of my card, and that's it. That's my card. Thank you so much for visiting today, and if you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them here in this video or on my blog comment section. Have a great day, everyone.